because they're just so interesting things that we're talking about. As you know, I've been off air and I've not been with you for about a month now because of the blessed month of Ramadan, and inshallah I'm back. I hope fasting was a spiritually blessed journey for yourselves and your families, and that you've had an absolutely amazing Eid. And inshallah, may Allah accept our worship and our ibadah from us, and increase us in our good deeds. Ameen. Today, Eid was just 2 days ago, or 1 day ago, depending, and we'd like to have a little bit more of a celebratory feel to our show. So I've got with me Saima Aslam from the Bradford Literature-Festival, which starts this week. So welcome, Saima.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time to come and be with us.
No, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And it's so nice to have something so positive to be talking about today, because as we know, we've had some challenges throughout the month of June.
Yes.
So thank you so much. And viewers, as you'll be aware, some of the challenges that I'm talking about and my thoughts and prayers, and I know everyone's thoughts and prayers actually go out to them, they've been very challenging for us all, is the families who've been affected by the terror attacks in London and Manchester, by the families who've been affected, and by all the people who are still worried by the attack on Finsbury Park Mosque, as well as the victims of the Grenfell Tower disaster. It's been a shocking month actually, and really sad and really worrying. And one of the things that sort of got me through it is actually how amazing our communities, Muslim and non-Muslims, have come through this together and worked together. And nowhere else, I think, was that example so clear and apparent after the Grenfell Tower disaster, where people have just been flocking there to help people out. And it also reminded me of the Joe Cox Foundation. And Joe Cox, as you'll remember, is the MP who was murdered this time approximately last year, actually on the 16th of June last year. And she was the MP who famously said that we have more in common than that which divides us. And one of the things that I've been involved with, in the district, is actually helping lots of these great get-togethers to happen, these picnics. And the running theme throughout them all has been, what do we have in common and how can we share our humanity? And inshallah, this is my prayer for all of us, is that we are blessed with the ability to love, with the ability to get to know other people and to actually let ourselves be known. So sometimes it can be hard if you're fearful of the other person, but there's lots of ways in which we can discover what we have in common. And one of those actually is, and this is why it works really well to have Saima with us today, is getting to know ourselves and our history and our culture, sharing that with other people. And actually in that process, when we start to understand different people's perspectives, we understand fear, we understand opportunities, and inshallah we open ourselves up to friendships and to new ideas, and which are all good things. And Islamically, seeking knowledge is incumbent upon us all. So with that in mind, I hope that's what you were expecting to talk about, Saima.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. So Bradford Literature Festival, when does it start this year?
So the festival starts on the 30th of June, which is this Friday. We do have an event tomorrow, which is about the technology disruption. That's taking place at the Advanced Technology Centre at Bradford College. But the festival itself will run from the 30th of June to the 9th of July for 10 days.
Fantastic. And it's in its third year now?
Yes, this will be the third festival. So this year we have about 300 events taking place across the 10 days.
Wow. And are all those 300 events in and around Bradford?
Yes. So we are the Bradford Literature Festival. We are the heart of Yorkshire, the literature hub of the north. The events take place in City Park. So there's lots of free family events taking place in City Park on both the Saturdays and Sundays in the festival. So there's 2 weekends in the festival. And then the rest of the events take place in venues around the City Park. So City Hall, Waterstones, we have the most beautiful Waterstones in England, Midland Hotel, Bradford College at the university, also in the City Library, and then also some events in the Alhambra Studio and the National Media Museum.
Fantastic. And seriously, we do have some of these amazing venues in terms of architecture and history, so it just looks amazing when you see and you go to talks and speeches in these places. So it's one of the jewels in our crown, should I say, in Bradford.
Absolutely. I mean, Bradford has just the most amazing architectural heritage, and it's something that we don't always focus on. So this year, one of the tours that we're doing is actually of Little Germany. Because obviously Little Germany has a very distinctive architecture because it was built by the Jewish German merchants who came to Bradford. And we're also doing a midnight event at Bowling Hall, which is the most haunted building in Bradford. So not for the faint-hearted. I won't be going.
No, neither will I.
So that will be ghost stories at midnight at Bowling Hall. And one of the annual tours that we do is actually of Undercliff Cemetery, because again that has some amazing Victorian monuments. But like I said, but you know, as you're saying, Bradford with City Park and with City Hall and Waterstones with the old wool exchange. This is just some amazing buildings here.
Fantastic. And City Park, it is worth mentioning, viewers, if you haven't been and if you're not from Bradford, definitely do pop in, because we've just received an amazing accolade in terms of the TripAdvisor I was going to say anointed it. TripAdvisor have classified it as an excellent destination, so that means nearly everyone who checks into City Park does so and calls it an excellent venue. So it's a really a real high achievement and definitely well worth a look, and it's something that we're really proud of. And it is a space for everybody. So it's Bradford by the sea almost on a sunny afternoon. It's absolutely heaving, so do come in and take part. So before we talk any more about individual activities, would you take us back a little bit? So 3 years ago you started with the Bradford Literature Festival. What was it? Why you and your partner, and what were you? I always have these things about, were you fixing a problem? What was it? What was the spark that said Bradford needs a literature festival?
Oh, well, I have a lot of, I'm a bookworm. It's probably the simplest way to describe it. So I love reading, and I always have. And I was, when I was growing up, I just used to devour books. And my mum would take me to the library every Saturday religiously, and that would be my sort of weekly fix. I would go and get my books, and then I'd sort of read for the rest of the week. And before doing the festival, I did quite a lot of work in the education sector, looking at how our schools are doing in the district, and also what the skills needs of the future are. And I felt that children needed to be excited about reading, because to me literacy is the key to engagement with any part of the curriculum, is the key to engagement with any skills training. Really, if you can't read, you can't access anything. And sometimes people don't think about that, because and I think it's particularly a thing with our Asian parents. There's a real emphasis on the sciences and maths, and actually you can't really engage with any of those if you haven't got the basic language skills. So some of it came from that, and I really believe that education has the power to change people's lives. So I was really interested in doing something around education, around literacy, around creating excitement about books. And I got involved in a film festival with a friend of mine, and that was really what sparked the idea. And then my partner in crime, Edna, she's far more from a cultural background than I am. And we had a number of discussions, and we were sort of saying, we could create some really amazing events. And really, that was where the thinking started from. And then the more we thought about it, we really felt that actually it's very difficult these days to find neutral spaces where you can come together and actually have a nuanced conversation. Because when you're talking normally on TV, you see all the panel discussions and things, but it's about sound bites, and it's about being quite vociferous. But actually to have a nuanced conversation where you can talk without fear, and and you're not suddenly Islamophobic or anti-Semitic or racist or whatever ism it may be. Those spaces are limited. And I have to say, unfortunately, as we've gone along, as the years have progressed, rather than that becoming something that we need to, it's less important, it's actually becoming increasingly important. Yeah. We set we sort of came up with the idea of the festival, and really we started working on it in March 2014. And I think we'd only really kind of put everything else aside and been working on it for a couple of days. And I think the first, there were some local elections, and UKIP had their first councillor elected in Keighley. And for me, that was a little bit of a chill wind. And then since then, obviously we've had lots of challenges. And I think, the other thing with creating the festival was also about, there are lots of issues at the moment that are challenges, and normally when people are having a discussion, there can be the elephant in the room, and people are afraid to address them directly, and we felt that actually we needed to own that dialogue. And then, you know, Bradford is such an amazing place. You know, it's got such a rich heritage.
Yeah.
You know, we've had all these waves of migration. You know, the Irish migration, the Jewish German migration, the Eastern European community that we had come in, then the South Asian community. And now we're seeing
African Caribbean,
Afro-Caribbean, you know, Eastern European, and that's really an amazing mix. And when we thought about it, we said, well, actually, if we create a festival that talks to all the different communities in Bradford, we will have a festival that talks to the UK. You know, it will reflect the changing face.
Even,
yeah, absolutely, the changing face of the UK. And that was precisely the thing. We said, you know, we've got a city which has communities from around the world. So, you know, when we talk about the festival, we say this is an international festival. You know, people can come to this from around the world. You know, we have some strands that we particularly focus on, like the Bronte strand. We're launching a King Arthur strand this year. We have a big strand around mysticism and philosophy. And those things are quite unique in the way that we focus on them.
And that lends itself to what I was saying right at the beginning, is actually the more in common element there. So when you talk about philosophy and then you talk about mysticism, you might talk about Sufism, and you know, the links there in terms of different ways for people to engage with spirituality as opposed to religiosity. So
Yes.
and that's another issue we have in Bradford quite a bit, and in many other places actually, where people talk about, oh, well, they're too religious, as if that's a thing necessarily. But you know, perhaps people are talking about fundamentalism or extremism when they mention it, but actually there's other ways in which people can explore and start to talk to each other about difficult issues, which,
Yes.
like you say, normally when you say something's the white elephant in the room, you're too scared to talk about it, but it gets in the way. So nobody mentions the word, but it still get in the way of the quality of conversations that you're having. And so, yeah.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I really believe that actually the common denominator that we all have is our humanity. You know, whatever else we may believe after that, actually at the core of world religions is humanity. And, you know, each religion came down to, you know, it's about perfecting your character. So for me, the mysticism and philosophy strand, that is really about, there are lots of people who are spiritual but not necessarily religious. So, you know, within that we talk about everything from sort of Rumi and Blake to the IQRA. You know, it's a really wide range. You know, we bring in poets like Rilke and Dante. So, and that actually, it creates this really, I mean, it's really quite beautiful. I mean, I remember looking at it last year and being really touched by the fact that there were so many people from so many different backgrounds who would come together in this one space to, you know, we had Alif Shafak there talking about the philosophy of Rumi, and, you know, and people were sort of queuing around the block to get books signed by her. We run an event which is Modern Day Mystics, which is poets of today who are inspired by the great masters of the past. And that may be, you know, that inspiration might come from Rumi and Islam, or from Buddhism, or you might just, you know, like I said, there are many people who are spiritual, and it's a really beautiful melding.
And it is, you know, definitely it's gone from strength to strength from what I can see. And like last year it felt a little bit, it was second year, but it was taking over the West Yorkshire, which is quite powerful. This year you've got quite a few international, I keep wanting to call them acts, but authors and writers and poets. Yeah. Is that right? So in terms of themes that you're exploring this year, do you just want to pick out a few highlights for us? We've talked about mysticism.
Yeah.
You've got a few other bits that are different to last year.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some themes that we run annually. So the mysticism and philosophy, the Bronte strand, these are all part of our annual themes. And we always have a big thing around, a big strand around current affairs, world affairs, politics. Poetry is always a big strand. We do lots and lots of different poetry events, from Urdu right through to, you know, English, and taking in the Roma language. So there's lots of interesting elements there. Some themes that we're focusing on in particular this year, one of them is empire. So obviously this year is the 70-year anniversary of partition. It's 100 years since the Balfour Treaty was signed, and 50 years since the 67 war between the Arab nations and Israel. So when we were thinking about that, and I sort of thought, you know, where does it all actually stem from? You know, let's take it right back to its roots. And of course, it's, you know, it's about empire. And so, you know, we've got events which are looking at the view, we have an event called The View from Kashmir, which is looking at, you know, where is Kashmir now? You know, we're 70 years on. What do the people of Kashmir itself actually want? So that is the focus of that event. But then we're looking at things like, you know, the legacy of Lawrence of Arabia. So, you know, if we actually take it right back, you know, we had the First World War, you know, the Ottoman Empire sort of coming apart, and that was what led to, you know, the formation of Saudi Arabia, you know, Israel being formed, you know, so it's those historic roots, and it's actually drawing all of those out. So that's one of the strands we're looking at. Future living, I mean, that's actually something we run. We ran a few events last year, but we're having a big focus on the environment this year.
Okay.
So, you know, where are we at the moment? So we have an event which is actually about geoengineering, which is actually talking about, has the world actually got to a point in terms of climate change where, you know, we can no longer, you know, our recycling is not the thing that's actually going to make the change. Have we actually gone past that point? Is it now going to require geoengineering to actually make that change? And then we've got an event, so, you know, with science fiction and fantasy, there is so much dystopia at the moment. You know, you look at the Maze Runner, the Hunger Games, Divergent, it's all about dystopic futures. So we're talking about, you know, what is the reality about these sort of scorched earth dystopian futures that we keep talking about?
Well, we're doing plenty of damage to it, aren't we?
Well, we are. And then we're also looking at, you know, so we're currently going through the fourth Industrial Revolution. So we're looking at, we've got a strand of events looking at the change that technology is making in our lives and the impact. So the event that we have this Wednesday is actually talking about the technology disruption in terms of the workplace. So, you know, in 5-10 years' time, what is the workplace going to look like now that, you know, with artificial intelligence, you know, we have self-driving cars, we have, you know, 40% of Amazon's workforce is actually robots. Where is all of that going to take us? So there's lots of interesting themes coming out there.
I must say, artificial intelligence does sort of freak me out a little bit. I just keep thinking, have you not watched Terminator? Why are we playing with things like that? You know, I really don't think we should. But having said that, because we've got such a drive for economy and efficiency, and we need things done faster, we need things done more precisely, you know, we're obviously going to go down that road, and then there are consequences too. That as well.
Absolutely, and there's, you know, there's positive consequences as well as negative ones, and it's actually, you know, one of the events that we have is the ethics of artificial intelligence. It's actually about, you know, where is that balance, and also looking at actually, you know, if you have artificial intelligence and you have self-learning machines, where, you know, at which point do you sort of start actually considering the machine? So, you know, those things are quite interesting. It's also it's the 200th anniversary year anniversary of Jane Austen. So we have a strand of events around that, you know, everything from sort of looking at Austen as a person through to Austen goes ethnic. So I don't know if you know this, but in Pakistan, Jane Austen has a fan club, and there are lots of people who sort of get together and read Austen and have afternoon tea and dress up in the Regency style.
In Pakistan.
In Pakistan. So I thought this was fascinating. Yeah. So, you know, so we're doing an event around Austen goes ethnic. So, yes, lots of different strands like that.
And will you be encouraging people to dress up and come for high tea?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, they have to. And
there's no reason not to dress up.
Now, I'm assuming I haven't dreamt this up, but because you were talking about engaging young people, I think you've also got a sort of a comic series as well, have you?
That's right. So the first weekend of the festival is our sort of comic manga strand. We're doing like a little mini Comic-Con. So in City Park on the first day we're going to have a superheroes theme. So there's going to be shows going on throughout the day where there'll be superhero performances, and we're going to have Big Hero 6 playing on the
big screen.
On the big screen. On the Sunday it's a fairy tale theme. So we're going to have a Grimm mashup show, so the Grimm fairy tales all mashed together. And then there are lots of events featuring different comic artists, talking about a range of things. So we've got everything from fairy tales right through to comics about conflict and refugees. So it's actually quite a diverse range. I'm really interested in comics because I feel it's a really fantastic way of getting children into reading, and that was actually part of the reason for creating the comic strand, because there are lots of children who might not necessarily want to pick up a book, but they're perfectly happy to engage with a comic. And also, you know, when we talk about the festival, we say it's actually about words and
stories,
and they're in everything from, you know, from books through to the theatre, through to film, through to games. So, you know, this whole thing at the moment with the sort of storification of gaming, that's absolutely fascinating as well. And it's the way actually in which some people and some children are now engaging with books. So, you know, they might play Minecraft and then go and get the Minecraft book.
Yep. And it's the other way around, whereas before it used to be someone wrote a book, then someone made a film, then there was merchandising. Now more and more it seems like it starts with gaming or, you know, or a comic, and then that then turns into something way bigger. It's interesting, obviously, you know, comics and superheroes are not everyone's cup of tea. TV might not be everyone's cup of tea, but obviously, you know, that's different ways. But one thing we are sort of encouraged, you know, as I said, Islamically, and just from a societal point of view, is to learn and is to challenge ourselves. So I think it's interesting, you mentioned sort of Islamophobia there a little bit at the beginning, anti-Semitism, and understanding the roots. So, you know, in terms of Israel and Palestine and the conflict there and the ongoing issues there, actually there's a lot of people who, you know, sympathise very heavily with the Palestinian plight but may not fully understand what's in the background. And accidentally, and we've seen it in quite high profile cases, people have sort of knowingly, unwittingly, whatever, you know, ended up being accused of an ism or another.
Yes.
And one of the things I always say to people is, if you don't know, go and find out. You know,
yes,
that won't make you and it won't make you an expert, but it's good to know actually. And I think for myself, anyway, it was 2014 when I just thought, you know what, I don't know enough about this and I need to go and learn a bit more. So I do think it's, you know, a responsibility for us all to find ways in which to engage. And that's one of the things I do like about the Literature Festival, is that whole variety. So I think one of the criticisms that's given to some other literature festivals, not necessarily ones in Bradford, is that something that can be a little bit highbrow and a little bit distancing. So, you know, like you've talked about the dystopia of and technology, etc., that can be a bit distancing. When you go to the other end, say, oh, well, look, we're talking about a Jane Austen dress-up fair, and now we can talk about parallels between, you know, high society in Pakistan and Jane Austen's time. I once took a group of girls to Stratford-upon-Avon, my background's youth work, and we were learning about sort of women in, you know, Shakespearean's times, and the conclusions these girls came up, and they were like, oh, it's like Pakistan now, you know, and that's what I'm saying about the parallels. They're not that far away from us actually. So
no, absolutely, and I think that is the thing actually with Jane Austen's novels. Actually, if you read them, they're not very far away from, you know, the way Pakistani or actually the subcontinent society functions as a whole. And it's the same with the Brontes. We find that, you know, we run the Bronte Strand, and actually there are so many girls who find a parallel with the lives of the Brontes and kind of the, you know, the environment in which they had to operate and some of the restrictions that they faced as women, and actually living within maybe a Pakistani household now. So there are always lots of parallels. But no, I completely agree with what you're saying about literature festivals. I think a lot of people hear the word literature and they think, oh, that's not for me. That's nothing to do with me. But one of the things that we're really keen on doing is actually opening it up. Because like I said, it's actually just about words. And we all use words, we all talk. We actually all read in whatever format it might be, whether it's just like a newspaper article or a tweet. You know, we're consuming words. And it's actually, you know, it's actually opening up in that kind of way. And, you know, and we've got events which are about cricket, we've got events about cars, we've got events about like I said, all the poetry events. So we've got a really big Sufiana Kalam strand. So there's, you know, lots of different ins into the festival. And for children, you know, we have the, you know, the shows in City Park. We have free drop-in workshops where they can make things. And it's just about connecting them into words, because actually, you know, if you can get your child reading and you can get them interested in books, like I said, they don't have to be a bookworm, but it will increase their literacy. It will actually help them in school, and it'll actually help them engage with all the subjects right across the board.
And I've always said that, and I say it to my nieces and nephews, you need words to help you understand every other subject. So it's all well and fine saying I don't like English, but actually if you can't read and write and write discursively as well and put your argument forward or debate, then actually you'll struggle with if you want to become an engineer. Because yes, you may deal with angles and mathematics and, you know, the physics of things, but when it comes to pitching a project to someone, you have to be able to, you know, speak and hold your own. If you, you know, if you become a plumber and you've got customers, you know, you've still got to be able to hold that discussion. You've got to be able to, you know, present yourself and argue your case. So whichever strands of whatever career, however you're going to contribute to society, words, like you say, are the pathway to relationships. And relationships, I mean, coming on to slightly different, it's how we interact with each other. So that's what takes away some of the fear that we've got. It builds new, you know, it strengthens society. And I think one of the things we sometimes forget or we don't talk about enough is actually it's just how we relate to each other. You don't have to become my best friend, but I've got to be able to have a conversation with you and to be able to disagree with you sometimes, but respectfully.
No, absolutely.
You know?
And I think books are really important in that because, you know, one of the things that is found time and again is that actually reading and reading fiction actually helps you with empathy and actually sympathising with other people. And you might not want to, like you said, you might not agree with them, you might not want to do what they're doing, but it's actually understanding other people's viewpoints. And, you know, and sometimes just being able to say, I might not agree with it, let's agree to disagree. And I think that that's something that's really lacking at times, that thing of actually having mutual respect and being able to say to someone, I don't understand your life experiences, I don't understand, you know, what your journey has been to actually sort of bring you to the mindset that you are at. But there's obviously everything always has a backstory, and I think that's where fiction and books are really, really important. And like you said, you know, whatever you do in life, you need to have that power to be able to talk to people, to actually debate, and to do it in a reasonable manner.
Well, I just read something, God, and I can't even remember what the source was, so don't quote me anyone, but it was just saying people who read books as opposed to newspaper articles and, you know, on social media, on average for 3.5 hours a week, live on average 2.5 years longer.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought, because this is how my mind works, and I thought, why would that be? And I'm just thinking, actually, it's very likely because for that 3.5 hours throughout the week, so it's not all in one go, I'm a bookworm, so when I used to have the time, I would devour a book in one sitting, basically, if that's what I wanted to do. So yes, 3.5 hours was nothing, because that could be 3 books in 3 days kind of thing. So, but I was just thinking, actually, it's partly because, this is what I'm thinking the logic and reasoning behind it may be, is for 3.5 hours, say that's half an hour a day, you stop thinking about your worries, you stop, you know, fretting about the washing, the car breaking down, the children's education, whatever challenges are going on for you at school, and you just focus on someone else and focus on someone else's characteristics and their traumas and their challenges and successes. It's an escapism of sorts, but equally, I think there's something about perspective as well. So whilst you're focusing on your worries and it all being terrible, actually, if you're reading non-fiction and you're reading an autobiography about someone else's life and you're going, oh wow, if they've come through that, then what am I moaning about? So sometimes it does put things into perspective. So I just thought that was a really fascinating little tidbit. I don't know how they would prove it, but I just thought there's, you know, and then there's also the physiology, isn't there? So if you're sat there nice and relaxed, your heart rate's down, you know, all of that, the positive impact that'll have on your blood pressure, and I'm no doctor, but I'm just saying, reasonably, you could expect that to be the case if you're sat and nicely relaxing. So whether or not you live 2.5 years longer, I mean, ultimately it's in God's hands, so I'm not going to I'm not going to say that's definitively the case, but definitely there is something there about it's just relaxing. And I think the perspectives angle of reading, I think, is quite powerful as well.
It is, and I think there are a lot of people actually where reading helps them get through a difficult situation. So we've actually got an event this year which is about you know, how reading has helped the 3 people who are in the events, one of whom is Mona Al-Tahavi, who wrote the book Headscarves and Hymens. And you know, it's actually about how books helped them get through a difficult situation and which books they were. And that's actually, you know, both in terms of reading and writing, actually writing and, you know, getting your emotions out. So we're doing some workshops around journaling. And we have another event which is actually about reading in prison, reading behind bars, and how that's helped people. So actually, there are lots and lots of positive impacts, and it's, you know, a book is just you know, it's just a gateway to, you know, to your imagination. It's sheer escapism, and it does actually take you completely away from what you're doing. I mean, I find that if I get very stressed about something, I'll just sit there and I'll read for 5 minutes just to get away from it all, and then, you know, go back to it. And
that headspace just does help clarify things for you. And one of the things I recognised also is I wasn't a great non-fiction reader, I must say. You know, sort of my sort of background was more like science fantasy kind of things. And murder mysteries, you know, why? And then I stopped because I just thought, why am I doing that, putting that horrible stuff into my mind, and then I go back to it. But I remember watching the film Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh yes.
Which was about the Crusades, and it was about, you know,
Salahuddin and his sister.
Exactly. And as I was watching it, I was thinking, I have no way to know whether this is factually true,
Yes.
historically accurate or not, or whether it's just, you know, had the Hollywood treatment. And so I sat through the whole thing thinking, okay, it's good, it's powerful, but I don't know if he was a character. Did he really exist? What was it like? You know, what happened? And actually for me, that then got me to go back and get Karen Armstrong's book, which is an introduction to Islam, because I thought I really don't know enough about the history. And then having read that, I thought, okay, now my appetite's whetted. I want to go and learn some more. So I joined a course on an evening at the University of Leeds, because I was interested in the history. So it was 6th century to 13th century Islamic history or something like that. It was fascinating, and I was just doing it because I was interested, and I think that's where that sort of curiosity, and books do encourage that, don't they? You know, and help you grow confidence, because actually if I didn't feel I could understand the words that I was reading, and therefore put myself in a situation where it was sort of like adult ed, really. I was just doing it purely for interest, you know, not related to work, not related to anything else except for this is my history and I'm not aware of it, you know. So Islamically it's my history as a Muslim, but also as a world citizen, and I've no idea really what's going on. So when people were talking about crusades and all the sort of barbarism that happened around that time, and you know, war is violent, whether it's now or, you know, in the 13th century, and it was just, and it just got me going. So, you know, I'm really interested in it, and I want to read, and I encourage other people to read, and I do find Karen Armstrong's books on Islam is really accessible, you know. And
yeah, no, she's a very good writer, and I think, like you said, a lot of people find her work really, really accessible. And I think the point that you make is really pertinent, because I think we have to know the facts, and I think, you know, with history, people don't change, and I think that's the great thing that you find when you read history. You know, humanity itself hasn't changed, the time has changed, and the situation may present itself in different ways, and the challenges may, you know, seem slightly different, but, you know, history seems to be quite cyclical in a way as well, and the same things come up time and again. And one of the great things about reading history is that you then see all of that. But I think one of the things, you know, and, you know, this happens quite a lot, where people will talk about things and they will have opinions about things, but they haven't necessarily researched the facts. And historical fiction has, you know, it's that thing about whetting your appetite. And you know, I completely agree with you. There are times when you read something and it's historical fiction and you think, oh, well, I'd like to know what actually really happened, and then that takes you back to history. But I think it's really important that, you know your history. And that's one of the things, you know, with one of the reasons why we, the strand that we run around Sufyan Kalam, and actually the cultural side of the subcontinent, and also about Islam. So, you know, we've got an event this year which is Islamic Civilization in 30 Lives, and also a history of India in 30 lives. We've got Shashi Tharoor coming along to talk about his book, which is
Inglorious Empire.
Yes, what the British did to India. But you know, these are all historical things, and they're really, really interesting things that we need to know about, because, you know, I really believe if you know where you come from, you can see where you're going. Whereas if you don't actually know your own roots, you can sort of flish around a little bit and not quite know where you want to get to. And, you know, there are sort of really great personalities that can be highlighted. You know, we've also got Christopher de Blake here, and he's talking about his book, The Islamic Enlightenment. So, you know, they're all really amazing speakers, fascinating books. And actually the great thing about literature festivals is that even if you don't want to read the entire book,
you can hear from the author.
You can go along and you can get that little sort of synopsis and that flavour of, you know, what that book is about or what that topic is about. And then you can think, oh, OK, I do want to know more about this. And you don't have to make quite that commitment that you have to actually going and buying a book and then sitting down. You know, you can then decide whether you want to make that commitment.
There's quite a bit of a buzz around, God, I can't say his name, Shashi
Tharoor's book, absolutely,
yeah,
yes.
Inglorious Empire, because when we were talking earlier about perspectives, that's another one. I haven't read it yet, so it's just, you know, I'm just going on what people have said, and people who have read it have said it's absolutely amazing. But an eye-opener as well, because again, it's presenting alternative angles, shall we say, you know. Yeah,
I mean, because, you know, that is the thing with history. I mean, I always think that, and that's whether it's history or whether it's Islamic history, you know, always read a couple of different accounts, because you can always tell where the writer's loyalties lie as soon as you open the book. And if you only read one account, you only get one perspective. And history is different perspectives. And yes, I mean, Shashi Tharoor's book has really caused, you know, it's created quite a stir, because it's looking at the British Empire, but looking at it from the point of view of the colonised rather than the colonising. And it is that thing of, you know, history is normally written by the victors, so you get a certain perspective. So I'm really looking forward to that session. I was really excited when you know it was confirmed that he would be able to attend.
Fantastic. So have all the events sold out yet? Or
no, the events are still selling. You know, we have some quite large capacity venues, so you know,
super.
You know, we tend not to worry about.
I'm asking that selfishly because I've not booked on anything yet.
I would book because some events have sold out.
Yeah.
Because some of the, you know, we obviously have some venues which have really large capacity, so we don't worry about those selling out because you know they really are very large. And then others, you know, we don't, you know, where we can only hold say 200 people. Those kinds of events do sell out. So if you haven't booked, do go onto the website and book.
Well, I thought I was not going to be in Bradford for it, and then I've realised I have, so I've just got it all a bit. I've just got it a little bit mixed up. So, word to the wise, really, do absolutely book on, because I think sessions with
Shashi Tharoor.
That really renowned person.
Yeah, so Shashi's doing his Inglorious Empire, and he's also he's in a current affairs event as well, which is looking at the world today. And that's actually sort of looking at how the world is today, not just from a sort of a European point of view, which is obviously what we normally sort of look at, but actually the entire world. You know, what are all the different countries doing? And that's going to be a really interesting event.
So we're going to go for a break in a couple of minutes' time, but when we come back, Saima, what I'd really like to talk about, we've talked a lot about his story, and it'd be really interesting to sort of unpick some of the female authors, and I know all the sessions are open to everyone, but actually, you know, any that you've particularly highlight for women who may be interested in going along to explore. I don't know if you're doing stuff around feminism, or, you know, I know you've got a section on British Islam. What does that look like? And that would be really interesting, because that's the other angle about when we talk about perspectives. When we talk about perspectives, quite often history is written by men.
Yes.
And it has been, and that's not a criticism of men writing. I'm not saying they shouldn't write, but historically, I mean, even here in the UK, it wasn't actually that long ago when women could write as women, you know. So even, I think a couple of 100 years ago, women were having to write as men just to disguise what they were doing.
Yes.
Yeah? Absolutely. So then this is interesting, and that would have been interesting to see what the other writers thought when this quite different discourse was coming out as a man. I can't remember what names they wrote under the male names, but
Acton Kerr and Ellis Bell.
Yeah.
And yes, and it is really interesting, because when they wrote as men, the books were perfectly acceptable. When it was realised that they were actually written by women, there was a real uproar, because it was considered to be you know, the topics were too coarse to have been written by a woman.
Yeah, and expectations of what women should be talking about.
What should be talking about, and what they should be writing about, and what, you know, it's actually permissible for them to say.
Absolutely, and how fascinating is that? So this is interesting, you know. It's one of, I won't say it's my hobby horse, but there's a lot of pressure on some of that, say, Southeast Asian communities, and lots of different cultures actually on, you know, in terms of feminism. We need to bring people up really quickly. People need to be and then when you think about the history of even the UK or the Western world, actually 200 years ago, a lot of the practices were here. So that's recent history, really. Even 100 years ago, if we think about, it's 100 years since the women got the vote this year. So actually, that's not that long ago, and that's here in the UK. And there are still some European countries who don't, or had it in the last 10, 15, 20 years.
And that's why it's so important.
Right. So we're going to go for a quick break, and inshallah, we'll see you on the other side.